Now here's a quick troubleshooting tip. If you have the caps lock key on your keyboard, you will not preview your animations. You have to have caps lock off or else you won't see any changes. Keep that in mind. All right, I've got my keyframes selected. Now I'm going to hover over one of them, right click, and choose Keyframe Assistant. And there's a series of different keyframes that you can choose, and we're going to go over that in a little bit. Easy Ease is the one we're going to do for this. You'll notice that the keyframe changed from a diamond to almost like an hourglass. That's the Easy Ease. So if I click on my graph editor again right now, I no longer have a straight line. I've got this little curve. I'm going to click here to enlarge it. That's this button right here will fit all your information into the speed graph. What's going on now, I'm going to hit the spacebar so you can preview the animation. It's slowing out of the first keyframe, building up speed to here, then slowing into the second keyframe. Changing from linear keyframes to Easy Ease is automatically going to make your animation look more professional and deliberate. That's the first step. Easy easing your keyframes, can't stress enough. It's one of the 12 principles of motion design called slow in, slow out. Now, here's how you get your own custom motion as a motion designer. Click on either keyframe. I'm going to start with the first one. This yellow square, that's the keyframe, okay? If I move it vertically up or down, that's going to change the value, how much it's moving in one direction. I don't want to do that. I want to stay where it is. You'll notice there's this yellow ball on a handle next to it. That's the influence handle. You click on the yellow ball at the end. If I move it and I hold down shift after I start dragging, first I start dragging, then I hold down shift. If I move it closer to that keyframe, like that, it's speeding faster out of it. I'm going to lower my resolution to 1/4 here so I can see it a little faster here. There we go. It's speeding quickly out of here. If I move it further away from it, so I drag, then I hold down shift, now it's going much slower out of it. See how it's taking time to get out of that first keyframe. This is a slower acceleration out of it. If I click and drag towards it, that's a faster, oops, I moved the square, so I'm going to click, and then I'm going to hold down shift as I drag. Now it's speeding faster out. So to speed faster out, closer towards it, slower out, drag away from it. Same with this keyframe right here. That yellow square is the keyframe. If I move it up or down, that's going to change how much of a position is moving, not the speed. I grab the influence handle. If I move closer towards it, it's speeding into that keyframe. If I move it further away from it, it's slowing into it. So if I wanted to go the fastest out of the first one and the slowest into the second one, that's what the speed graph's going to look like. Now let's preview that animation. I'm going to hit the spacebar. Right there off the bat, we have a custom motion. We have 2 keyframes, and all we did was change the velocity out of one and the velocity into the next. We're going to go over this every class, every step of the way. These are the basic fundamentals of motion design, and we're going to build off them, so don't get worried. I'm teaching them to you now, and we're going to fine-tune and finesse and perfect them throughout the semester. So remember, think about what you want to do, then figure out how you want to get there. You got your 4 pillars of motion design: position, scale, rotation, and transparency. Move the anchor point to where you want it to be, because all your animation is based off of that anchor point. If I have it up here at the corner and I rotate, it's going to swing like a pendulum. If I put it in the center, it'll spin around like a propeller blade. If I put it at the bottom and I'm scaling, it'll grow up like a tree. If I want to have elevator doors opening and closing, I'd put it on the edges of the left and the right and non-uniformly scale the sides. So remember, the anchor point will influence that animation. Then you move your playhead to where you want your animation to start. Click on the stopwatch you want to animate. You need a minimum of 2 keyframes. They have to be at least 1 frame apart. Move the playhead to where you want your change to be, and make your change. The closer the keyframes are together, the faster that change will be, and the further apart, the slower that change will be. Once you got your keyframes and you want to adjust the velocity in and out of them, select them, right-click, choose Keyframe Assistant, Easy Ease, then go into your speed graph editor right here and adjust them. We're going to be doing this 1,000 times this semester. It seems daunting at first, but every step of every animation you do will be these steps. So you're going to be doing them like 20 times each class, and it'll just become muscle memory after time. I'm introducing it to you up front so that you're used to it and you're going to grow faster as a motion designer. Remember, the value graph is how much of a change is happening, like how much scaling, how much position, how much rotation. And the speed graph changes the speed out of the first into the second for your keyframes. And don't move the yellow squares, those are your keyframes, the value of what's changing. You want to move the influence handles. I'm going to run through that whole workflow real quick. I'm going to delete my square, go out of my speed graph. I'm going to make another square. I'm using simple shapes so you can focus on the principles and the techniques, and then once you know that, you could apply it to whatever you want. Images, video, text, whatever. It all works off of this workflow, okay? Think about what you want to do, all right? I want this square to move from one side of the screen to the next. That's position. Now, I know what I want to do. I've got my anchor point in the middle, because for the position, I'm just going to want it based off the center of where this is. I move the playhead to where I want the motion to start, have my anchor point where I want it, and I know I want to do the position. I could find it in the transform, or I could just hit the P key. Got the playhead where I want it, the anchor point where I want it, I click the stopwatch I want to change, and I just make the change over time. I want it to be, let's say, 3 seconds this time. I'm going to move my render area a little bit past there. I could use my selection arrow and click and drag and move it. I could hover over here and drag my slider, or I could type in an absolute number like that and then hit the enter key. And that creates my second keyframe. So there's my motion. Now, I can go in and change my keyframes with the speed graph to get a more professional look. I could click and drag to marquee drag both of them. I can click the word position, or I can just select one, hold down shift, and get the other one. Remember, do not click the stopwatch a second time. I'm going to click the word position, hover over one of the keyframes, right click, keyframe assistant, easy ease. Now they're eased. That changes the motion right away. And remember, what I did was I changed my resolution to a quarter resolution right here, just so I could preview my animations faster, because I got a little bit of a lag from filming while recording. Right here is the speed graph editor. Since these are eased, I've got a slow coming out of the first one. Here's the maximum velocity right there. It's slowly going into the next one. I can click on one of the keyframes, and remember, do not move the keyframe up or down. That'll change the value, how much is happening. We want to change the velocity by clicking on the yellow handle and then holding shift after we've started dragging. Moving it further away slows it into it. Moving it closer speeds it into it. Same with first keyframe. Moving it closer speeds it out of it. Moving it further away makes it come out of it more slowly. So if I want to go the slowest speed out of there and almost the fastest speed, this is the exact opposite of the last speed curve that we had. Those are the building blocks for all your motion designs, that workflow. Now we're going to tackle shape layers. So I'm going to leave my speed graph and I'm back in my timeline. These are your shape layers up here. You could also draw a shape layer with the pen tool. Up here at the top, if you click the word fill, you can get rid of the fill, do a solid fill, or a gradient or a radial gradient. That's by clicking the word fill and then choosing the option one. If I click the color next to the word fill, I can change the color of what's inside that shape. Stroke, same thing. If I click the word stroke, I can turn off the stroke, give it a solid stroke, a gradient stroke, or a radial gradient stroke. I don't want a stroke. I'll get rid of it. Otherwise, if I did want a stroke, let's say a solid stroke, and I'll click on the color to change it so you can see it more easily. Make it a nice bright red right here. And I click OK. And here you can hover over and click and drag to change the width of the stroke. So now you see how you can add or remove a fill or a stroke. I'm going to click the word stroke and get rid of that. Shape layers, I want you to think of them as an empty salad and you're walking up to a salad bar. What's that mean? You can add into that shape layer whatever you want, and it's very customizable. With the shape layer selected in my timeline, I can go to this add button up here, or I can twirl down inside and the add button is right here at the bottom. You got two different ways of getting to it, but you have to have the shape layer selected first. So let's say if I wanted to, let's try wiggle paths. Click off, and I'm going to hit the space bar. There's wiggling happening to the shape now that was automatically added by that add feature. Or I could do wiggle transform. See what that looks like. That one's not as obvious, so I'm going to undo that. Let's try zigzag. So you don't see anything happening. That's because I'm going to need to add some keyframe information. So here's my shape. Here's the contents, which is the rectangle right there. We added zigzag. Hide my transform. So here is the magical secret of After Effects. Anything with the stopwatch can be animated over time. Remember, move the playhead to where you want that animation to start, click that stopwatch, then move your playhead at least one frame. The closer it is, the faster the change. The further the playhead is away, the slower the change. So, I see I've got size, ridges, points. All these have stopwatches. Let's check size. I'll move my playhead, and then I'll make a change. Now let's preview that animation. See? That's changing over time now. And you can click on multiple stopwatches. I'm going to click ridges per second right here. This is where it creates a keyframe. I'll move over here, and I'll create the change right there. You can make as many changes as you want over time, and anything with the stopwatch can be animated. So the possibilities are limitless. And you also see there's drop-down menus. So I could do corner, or I could do smooth. I've already got a different look just by changing how the zigzag is affecting that shape. And you can add more than one effect if you want. And it doesn't even have to be an effect. There can be other things you can add. You could add more shapes and punch out or add on to them. You just keep adding on and on and on. We're going to be diving deeper into a lot of the changes you can do with the add function on your shape layers. I just wanted to show you some of the play you can have with the shape layer. Up here at the top, you've got layer, new. And this is where you add anything into your timeline. You could add text, a solid, lights, cameras, nulls, adjustment layers. We're going to cover all of this throughout the course. The difference, you're going to say, well, what's the difference between a solid layer and a shape layer? Here it is right here. Solid layer, you can make a solid color. You can use it to put an effect in for visual effects. Shape layers have path points, okay? And you can animate those paths over time, which we'll be getting into. And you're going to see, think about like in Illustrator. You've got paths. The more path points you have, the more you can change the shape, like the Bezier curves and the handles. I mean, you couldn't do that with the solid layer. That would just be for adding a solid color in or an effect. So that's the difference between shapes and solids. We'll be diving more into that throughout the semester. So I'm going to delete that shape, and I'm going to make a circle this time. All right, there's a circle. And now I'm going to go into layer management. All right, and this is crucial for After Effects. So I'm going to put my anchor point in the middle, and it's already there. and I'm going to roughly center this in the timeline. I'm going to work with scale for this demonstration. So I hit the S key with the shape layer selected. I'm going to move the anchor point, I already did. I'm going to move the playhead next. I want to start at the beginning of this animation. I'm going to change this to 0. Okay. And I'm going to uniformly scale it for this. Well, click my stopwatch. So it's going from nothing. Let's go 1 second, or I could type here 1.00. I'm going to change that to 100, which was the size I drew. And I'll go 1 more second to the 2 second mark, where I could type here 2.00. I'm going to change it to 0 again. So I'm going to move my render bar a little bit by clicking and dragging. So there's our basic animation. Scaling from nothing up and back down. Okay? So I already did my keyframe. Let's let me undo that. I'm going to click the word scale to select all my keyframes. Hover over one, right click, keyframe assistant, easy ease. So now I've got a little bit more life to my animation. I'm going to go into my keyframe, I'm going to go to my graph editor. Now since there's 3 keyframes, this is the graph, how it looks. I'm going to click here to see it at its full. I want to slowly scale out of the first one. I'm just randomly playing around here. I'm going to speed out of the middle, and I'm going to slow into the end. Okay? Now let's see how that changes my animation. Like that. Okay? It's a little bit more severe. Has more life. I was just messing around. You can dilate in over time, messing around with it. I'm just showing you some of the options here. So I've got my motion, I've made my keyframes, and I've changed the graph editor. With that layer selected, if I hit Command or Control D, that duplicates the layer. What's that mean? With that layer selected, if I hit the U key, that'll show me the keyframes. When you duplicate a layer, you duplicate all the keyframes. You also duplicate, I'm going to click on the word scale and go to my speed graph. You duplicate the velocity changes plus the keyframes and any effects you applied on it. It's an exact duplicate of it, which is great. That's what Control or Command D do. Command D and Control D duplicates the layer. So I'm going to move my playhead a few frames. I'm going to click on the top layer and drag it in the timeline. This is called offsetting your animation. You go, well, what does that mean? Well, I'll click up here to change the color of the second one. I'm going to change it to a darker blue. Here's what's going to happen. So now I've got the first one coming up, then the second one is doing the same thing, just offset in time. I'm going to move that a little closer together so it speeds in a little faster. I'm going to hit Control D or Command D to duplicate the duplicate again. Hit the U key to see my keyframes. Move a few frames. Now I'm going to drag just the top one. I'm going to change the color of that one again. Let's make it red just so you can see the change. I'm going to change my render bar to get the full animation. Let's take a look at it now. That's just getting something a little more stylish and easy with doing your work once and duplicating it. That's duplicating a layer. Now we're going to see how to split duplicate a layer. So I'm going to delete these just by selecting delete. And I'm going to stay with circles for now. All right, I'm going to want, no, we'll see it's easier with a square. All right, I'm going to put my anchor point at the bottom for this demonstration. No, you know what? Actually, I'm going to set it to the side, and I held down Control or Command to snap it there. I'm going to want this to open up like an elevator door, so that's scale. I moved my anchor point to where I want the motion to come out of. I moved the playhead, and now I've got the stopwatch ready. I told you before about non-uniformly scaling, so I'm going to break that chain. I'm going to click the scale button. And it's going to scale off the X side to side. So I'm going to change that first number to 0. I'm going to move forward in time. And I'm going to change that one number back to 100. So I'm non-uniformly scaling out of that edge to get that animation. I told you before, move the anchor point before you start animating, okay? Now, what happens when you've got a layer that you want multiple animations to come out of from different anchor points? That's when split duplicate comes in handy. So I've got the playhead where my last keyframe is. I can always double check by hitting my previous and next arrows right there. Control and Command D will duplicate the layer. I showed you that. I want to split duplicate it. So I'm going to hit Command Shift D or Control Shift D, or I could go Edit Split Layer. That's where that is. That's the two ways of doing it. And I'm going to hit the U key, and you're going to notice my keyframes are there, but they're after the layer starts. I can even delete them if I wanted to, so there's no confusion, because I've got them down here on this version. So there's my motion still happening. So let's pretend I want this to then shrink down to the bottom. I'm going to move my playhead a little bit. Okay, good. Now, with the top duplicate, the split duplicate selected, I'm going to move my anchor point to the bottom middle. Now when I click Scale and I move ahead in time, I'm going to scale this down non-uniformly. I'm going to change the second number down to a Y. I'm going to move my render area. So here's the original layer. The anchor point is here on the side. It's scaling out of it. I split duplicated it. The anchor point's now at the bottom, and it's scaling downward. That animation is possible because I split the layer and then moved the anchor point. So it's getting two different styles of animation. It's animating out of the side, and then it's animating down towards the bottom. I split the layer and changed the anchor point, but I'm still just scaling it. It shows you how the anchor point drives the animation and it influences the way it's going to look. Moving it around will completely change your animation. That's why you want to think about what you want to do. Move the anchor point first, and then if you need it to change its direction, split the layer, and then set the anchor point up to where it needs to be and start keyframing again. Now, I showed you before the keyframes were at the beginning of this layer. And I also showed you can click and drag on a layer and move around the timeline. And you know you can go from previous to next with those keys. If I want to make sure this snaps to where this playhead is, I would hold down the Shift key while I'm dragging it. So that's me without holding down Shift. If I hold down Shift, now it's snapping to it. Shift helps snap things together. That's moving the whole layer. Now watch what happens if I move my playhead here. You're going to see the selection arrow changes from that to that double edge. What just happened is I trimmed where this layer starts. So that means the computer's not going to see it, or the audience won't see it until there. It's no longer lined up with my keyframe. I just clicked and slid it past there. Well, now you see it's over that layer. So be careful when you're moving your layers around and make sure that you have them beginning and ending where you want them to. I'm going to hold down Shift and drag. So now there's no glitch or no overlaps or no empty spaces. You can move the full layer, or you can change where it begins or ends. Another thing you can do, I've got this layer selected right here. I could drag from that edge like I showed you with, this is how you zoom in and out of your timeline with this button right down here. I could wait for that double arrow and move it that way. That's one way. Or if you want to be precise, hold down Alt and the brackets next to the letter P. The first one changes the in point where it starts. The second one changes the out point where that layer ends. So if I hit the second bracket, that trims it to where the playhead is. Same with this. If I have this right here, if I hold down Alt and I hit the bracket right next to the letter P, that changes the in point. That's the in point, that's the out point. It's always how it goes in the timeline. You can zoom in and out there. See right there, there's a dead frame because because they don't line up. I can fix that just by holding down Shift and dragging. Now everything lines up. And I can hold down Shift to change my render bar too. Another thing I can do, let's take this layer and duplicate it, Command D. But let's say I want it to start right here. Well, I could drag and hold down the Shift key, or I could just hit the bracket next to the letter P, not Option bracket, just plain old bracket. Will snap the beginning of that layer to where the playhead is. So that's a couple, and I'm going to hit the U so you can see the keyframes. That's a couple of tricks with working in your timeline. And all this is in the slides. We're going to tackle importing Illustrator and Photoshop files in the next session. I just wanted this session to be the basics. And I'm going to probably split this up into maybe 1 or 2 videos. We'll see how long it's going to be. But the next session will be on importing your Illustrator and Photoshop files. And once you do have those layers in there, everything we covered is the same. You move the anchor point on that layer, you figure out what you want to do, position, scale, rotation, transparency, move the playhead where you want it to start, click the stopwatch you want to change, move the playhead for how long or short you want that animation to be, make your change. Don't get intimidated by it, don't get daunted by it. You can email me, I'll answer all your questions. That's your basic workflow. It's always think about it first, then figure out how you want to get there. Move the anchor point first because that's where the animation will be driven by. Then you move the playhead to where you want the animation to start and click on the stopwatch you want. Then move the playhead in time. The closer the keyframes are together, faster the change, further apart, slower the change. You need a minimum of 2 keyframes. Make sure caps lock is off so you can preview your animations and hit the spacebar to watch them as you're animating. And, select your keyframes, ease them, and adjust them in the speed graph. We're going to keep on doing this throughout the semester and slowly building onto this workflow. I just want you to see the whole workflow up front. Might be intimidating, but just keep practicing, practicing, practicing. Because you're going to do this 1,000 times by the end of the semester. I'm not exaggerating. It's a very structured workflow, but if you keep that workflow, you'll always have clean, professional results that'll help you get your foot in the door for job interviews. So I hope you have a great semester, and like I said, you're going to have all my tutorials and the slides to work off of and these virtual ones, and hopefully we'll all be able to meet up online and learn in real time on YouTube with unlisted live streams. So I'm going to reach out and I'm going to see if we could all try and meet up, and it's so much easier to learn that way if you've got my instant feedback and you can watch me going over it in real time and explaining it to you. Hope you have a great class and a great semester, and I'll see you at the next lesson.